So there are a lot of factors that go into our job, which is providing content, right? Providing predictions, providing analysis. There are a lot of things I take into account when I am making projections and things like that. So I've been thinking Georgia has been perceived a certain way this offseason. They've been perceived as a contender, and odds would tell you that, and where they are placed on people's rankings would tell you that. But there have been plenty of, experts and analysts, however you want to phrase them, however you want to look at them, as people who kind of doubting Georgia a little bit as a serious national championship contender. There's the camp that wants to doubt them but can't because, hey, they've got Kirby Smart, they've got defensive talent, they've got some consistency, right? So there's the camp that wants to doubt them but has a hard time doing it because of the belief they have in Kirby Smart. There's the camp that really doesn't believe in Gunnar Stockton, and that's a big reason why Georgia's not in people's top three. They're ranked 5, 6, 7, 8, according to some. Well, I think that part of this is we're not 100% sure if they do or don't, just because there's definitely some new starters and there's some younger players, but there's a lack of known star power heading into the season for Georgia. And that's something that I want to talk about a little bit today is, will they have that top-end talent that is typically needed to get over the hump to win the national championship? What do I say? Over and over and over again. We measure Georgia against themselves, really. We measure them against a standard of being elite and being a true national championship contender. Last year, they were a contender, right? Not as serious as a contender as they were in 2023 when they didn't win it, and obviously not as serious as a contender as when they went back-to-back or in 17 when they lost in overtime in the national championship. But they were still a contender, and they still had star talent, and that helped them win an SEC championship. This season, that star talent isn't as obvious. It's not as well known. It's not, hey, that team's got Brock Bowers. They are going to, you know what I mean? Like that notion, oh, you feel good about them having one of the best players in the country. You feel good about them having Jalen Carter. There was a time when Georgia had these types of players where people said, hey, that's one of the best defensive players in the country, if not the best. That's one of the best offensive players in the country, if not the best. And they've had these players for the last few years. Then this offseason rolls around, you start to look at this roster. I know, and many of y'all know, how good some of these players are on the Georgia team, but they aren't these well-known established stars in college football. Some of this is projection with these players, and some of it is, hey, they just don't have the top-end talent they had before. So that's what I want to explore, is whether or not they do or will have that top-end talent this year. Because, look, I like to go back through the last 10 years of college football, since that's the recent memory. As I get rid of those sounds, that's the recent memory, right? And the things that have been going on over the last few years, that's how you kind of compare it to say, hey, do they have what it takes this season? Do they? Ryan Curley from Dawg Post, navigating whether or not they've got real star power at the top end, or at least elite top-end talent. Let's think about it this way. I already kind of mentioned the Jalen Carter, Brock Bowers portion. They don't have anyone like that. I don't think they do. Okay? Jalen Carter is one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL and is a Super Bowl champion already. Brock Bowers walked in and broke rookie records for receiving and has established himself as a top 5 tight end already, if not potentially the best in the NFL. So that top of talent, do they have that? Well, a handful of players that people think can maybe be that. I would say the top 3 that would come to most people's mind would be safety KJ Bolden, running back Nate Frazier, and wide receiver Zachariah Branch. I believe that's what the general population would say, hey, we think they're stars. I think CJ Allen, the linebacker, someone else that people would throw in there. Are those guys ready to be that, or are they that? I think is rather the real question. Are they top-end college football talent? And that's what I really mean. It's not just, hey, are you one of the best players on your team, but are you one of the best players in the country? Ohio State last year had Caleb Downs, the best defensive back in college football, best safety in college football, according to many, If he wasn't, there are definitely a handful of guys that were really good as well. They're in the NFL now, like Xavier Watts, Andrew Makuba, Jahdae Barron, just to name a handful, Malachi Starks. But they had Caleb Downs, someone that is considered that. They had Jeremiah Smith on offense. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's all sorts of talent around these players. But that Ohio State championship team, they're probably not a championship team if they don't have like that top end talent. If you go to Michigan in 2023, what did they have? Well, on defense in particular, one of the best defensive tackles in college football. They had Mason Graham. They had Will Johnson, the corner. They had David Ojabo. You know what? David Ojabo may have been on the 2022 team, but you get my point. They had all of those. They had the top end guys who were arguably the best of their position in the sport, along with a bunch of other 4 and 5-star caliber players. And Georgia, obviously, the defense that they had with all of those future first-round picks in 21 and in 2022, you get Bowers, you get Stetson Bennett, who was one of the best quarterbacks in the country, as well as Jalen Carter and guys like Javon Bullard and people like that, some of the best in their position. So I don't think I have to keep going too far back, right? Obviously, LSU and Alabama, 19 and 20, they're going to have those examples. It's the same thing with the Clemson teams in the 2010s and the other Alabama teams in the 2010s. And Florida State with Jameis Winston being the Heisman winner when he won. Cam Newton in 2010. Go back to Florida in the 2000s. They have some of the best players in college football. And I think that people just don't know as much about these players. And I really do think that that's part of why Georgia, this is kind of a betting term, but is being faded a little bit, right? People are not as interested in them as a national contender as perhaps they would be if they did have those like big recognizable names. They've got a quarterback in Gunnar Stockton that not many know much about, right, outside of Georgia. They've got a lot of transition and a lot of youth on defense. And we're not exactly sure if they have an offensive star. It's projection with Nate Frazier. It's projection with Zachariah Branch. As good as I think Zachariah Branch is going to be for this offense, and I think that he's going to provide them a spark offensively and on special teams, it's not like he was ultra productive in a USC offense that throws the ball a lot. And he was a younger player. Now he's an older player. And maybe things change for him at Georgia, where he's potentially going to be utilized as more of a premium weapon than he was as a reserve for the most part at USC. So I think that that's kind of the thing. My answer would be I do think Georgia has star talent, right? I don't know if they're in a position where they have the best players in the country, or at least a handful of them. I do think KJ Bolden will end up being one of the best safeties. I do think C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson will make up the best starting linebacker tandem in the country. I think that the front seven specifically is maybe where they lack that top-end talent that they've had in the past, but I wouldn't say it's impossible that Jordan Hall, Christian Miller, Elijah Griffin, all of those defensive line guys, right? I'm not sure that it'd be fair to completely write them off as not being potential stars. On the offensive side of the ball, I don't know that they have like that top-end talent, but they have much more depth and talent just across the board that makes you feel better. It's the defensive side of the ball where you're going to find, hey, there's probably going to be a few top-end guys here. Now, this question is similar for the rest of the country. I think that with Texas, people think Arch Manning is going to be one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best. People think Anthony Hill Jr. is one of the best linebackers, that Ryan Wingo will be one of the best wide receivers, right? Just a few examples over there with Alabama, a Ryan Williams at wide receiver, a Caden Proctor at tackle, right? Some of the best at their position. With Ohio State, you get Jeremiah Smith again, and you get Caleb Downs again, right? So other schools, you don't have to think about it as hard as you do at Georgia, and I think that's part of why people are maybe writing them off a little bit, is because they just don't recognize some of these names. They're going to know them by the end of the season is how I'm going to put it. Appreciate you watching. There are links down below in the description of this video. Dawgpost.com is where you need to be going for all of your insider stories. Matt is killing it right now with all of the recruiting updates. Go check that out.